Thank you very much, Lawrence, also for inviting me and also the rest of the organization. I left my translation there, but I think you sort of said that I'm an artist who work on durational projects. For today, I thought the other way around. I will start with some short-term interventions, more event-based, and then hopefully in half an hour end with a longer project which I'm working on it for 5 years at the moment. But to give you a little bit of an idea how my practice is working and is shaped. And I'll just start a little bit reflecting on some things, and then I will go to explaining into projects. The current economic crisis has generated numerous local zones of conflict. Many neighborhoods have become site of contestation, into which different conditions of powers are inscribed, where everything seems to be locked up by over-regulation and populist images prevail. People are increasingly becoming disinvested and excluded from their own environment. There is a serious disconnect between ordinary people and their government. The question is, are we capable of creating a place and associated capacity for a public faculty, a public domain, where we can research, debate, face up to the confrontation and address one another as co-producers of the city? My concern as an artist is, how can I work with my skill within the complexity of our cities? Can I put myself to work in areas that are undergoing rapid change, that are under huge pressure from the forces of globalization? How can I work towards making the right to produce our daily environment a possibility? I like to work on self-organization, collective ownership and new forms of sociability. I like being a tool or an instrument, if you want, this in the light of the discussion of how art can be instrumentalized, that enables all of us to occupy the place we live in and to shape a common narrative of place. And this is a sort of statement, I leave it from there. I'm just going to speak out of that because I think it's more easy, also with accents and with language and stuff like that. I'll just want to take you to something I'm doing as a sort of kind of sketchbook. And I call them public faculty. And public faculties are all about learning collectively to take responsibility. Because I work for very long periods of time with communities in places for sometimes 5 to 10 years. I sometimes, get stuck in some of the fights and the struggles that are going on, stuck between some of the communication or the negotiation that are going on. And in order for myself to practice myself in also skills of listening, and skills of working in the public, addressing the public, I devised what I call a sketchbook, and that sketchbook I called public faculty. And public faculty are actually very simply shaped. They take place on a public space, taking a very pressing issue and starting to discuss that with whoever wants to join in the public. They take 4 days, 4 hours a day, and they're just random acts of trying to engage with audience, to speak, but more strongly to listen to the situation at hand. And it might sound very easy. The first one took place in Skopje in Macedonia, where I was standing on the stage, where you see behind, trying to talk about the derelictness of the park, where the platform was in, and the way the park has been abandoned and have not been taken care of by the people. The first 2 days, when I was standing there and walking back and forth on the platform, I was just speaking to the trees. Nobody wanted to engage with me at all. People were thinking, who is this woman? Just talking about public space, about the need to address common good, about the need to take care for environment together. People were thought like cuckoo. And then this woman with the white hair, she came up to me and she said, "Are you all right?" And I think that sort of changed the game completely, because that started the discussion. I said, like, I'm basically all right, but I really have questions. I have questions around this space, and could you help to answer me that? And that sort of sparked, she came back also the next day, but that sparked some of discussions with other people, and then we started to sort of draw out these discussions on the wall. Now, I always have to say with public faculty, it's not about trying to find the right answers. Most of the answers I already heard before, but it's about trying to listen about how these answers are formulated, or the way, the detail in which people rephrase certain things you think you know, certain things you know about abandonment, about care, about policing, about control and this. Because a lot of people say, oh, the best way to take care of this park is to put every 5 meters a trash can. And then somebody said, put a police next to it. And that gives a fine, because that will help control the fact that people behave as good citizens. Other people are very concerned that if you would do that, that somebody would then, and the space would become very nice and clean, somebody would open a bar there and you had to pay for a coffee if you wanted to sit on a bench. So the discussions were, I think, a lot of things you could imagine. But more strongly, I think it was in the detail. It was in the details of describing what people thought were really the problematics, or what they thought could or might be the answers. And this one very much revolved at the end around the masculinity of public space and different notions of care around public space. And at the end of every public faculty, we publish a public faculty in one way or form, and this was one in our radio conversation about some of the notes we took. Because like I said, public faculty is like a sketchbook. I think what I try to research with public faculty is something that comes back in all of my work, and that's how can you make existing conflict productive? And this one was taking place in Rotterdam near my studio, where there was a shooting. The shooting was of course bad. But what was more interesting is that the city used that in this area, as an area is very diverse, 80% diverse area, to actually put a state of control or a state of exception. So there was an 8-hour clock. You couldn't be on the street anymore. You were not allowed to sit on the benches anymore, and young people were actually asked to leave the space. And there were 24-hour camera surveillance, and you could be body searched when you were hanging out there, all these kind of measurements. And basically what we did with this faculty, because my studio is on that square, is that we basically created a table, or a lot of tables, because there are 20 benches on this little square. It's a lot of benches. And as soon as somebody dared to sit on one of the benches again, somebody would come out, put a table, somebody else would come out with a very nice plate of coffee, served you a cup of coffee, and then started the conversation on what kind of behavior or what kind of relationships do we actually want, or do we actually like to foster in this place. Also with this faculty, it's like I sometimes say, serving coffee can be a serious urban intervention, but it was also about questioning that the way to sort of make public space safe is only through measurement of control. Is there a possibility of entering into another dialogue or into another mode of negotiation? And of course, I think what I always say, your audience is not stupid, because I do this 4 days, 4 hours on a row. After the first day, people started to note, so oh, if I sit down, I get a free coffee and I get a free cake as well. So, but more strongly, I can finally engage in this discussion. So, of course, day 4, all the 20 benches were full with people drinking coffee, discussing this kind of things. And the only thing the police could do is finally give us a fine, because we didn't ask for a terrace license, a license to have a public terrace, although we served the coffee for free. So faculties for me are, and a lot of my work is about that, it's like learning together what it takes to be a citizen. And not only learning that together through interventions, through acting out, but also finding ways to demonstrate this back into town. And it's a way of common learning, and some of the main questions around the public faculties is, can public space still hold truth? And to give you an idea that they vary from locations. One was in Vranja in Serbia, one was in London, in Rotterdam. So they are really like my sketchbook, they are practicing. Because I think that's something we need to do in these conditions at these times, practice our skills in creating more public and more democratic spaces, or creating more democratic experiences if you want. So this one was in the main street of Copenhagen, the main shopping street of Copenhagen, and this one was on austerity. Very unpopular subject in the main street of shopping street of Copenhagen, to stop people and to talk about money. I didn't do this alone, I never do the faculties alone, I did this together with Rasmus Ugrit, and we talked about money, asking people what they thought about the austerities measurement, Copenhagen was taken, but also in relating to Europe in general. Now, when we first put up a sign with the faculty, like, let's talk money, nobody wanted to talk to us. Then we put up a sign, we said, we just talked. And then a lot of people came up to us and said, like, why? Why do you want to just talk? Are you a religious organization? Are you want to sell something? Do we have to sign up for something? Of which political party are you? In fact, to exercise public speech, even in a very contested zone, seems to create a lot of curiosity. And more strongly, like I said, what the faculties always do is they draw from the conversation in one way or another through language on a format. And in Copenhagen, we used, in Copenhagen in the main city center street, there are people standing with a sign that says, like, if you get a haircut today, you get a free shampoo. Or if you buy a doner kebab, you get free cola for €5 or whatever it costs. And these people that hold the signs, which is quite a heavy job to stand there to hold the signs, they're mostly coming from Romania or Bulgaria to do this kind of work. And I basically asked those people if they would also carry other signs for the day. And most of them say, okay, what does that pay? And I said, what do you normally get paid? And they said, we normally get like €7–8 an hour. So I said, okay, what if we pay you €10 an hour? Would you work for me? Of course, they said it doesn't mind working for you. But then engaging in this conversation with them, it turns out there are also students in architecture. There are 2 students architecture that stand there. And one of them was carrying a sign. She said, can I also contribute to the conversation? I said, please contribute. So let me carry this sign and saying, like, I make €10 an hour doing this. And that was sort of like an interesting sign to carry, because a lot of people stopped and said, like, are you still hiring? Can I do this work for you? And more strongly, the guy who was standing there, and guy was just recently fired before his pension, and he could need the extra money. He said, I don't mind doing it. Now, having some Romania and Bulgarian girls and men holding signs didn't raise so much conversation, but seeing an old Danish guy holding the sign, I make €10 an hour doing this, made a lot of people stop and engaging in the conversation. So it's also a way to find a way to sort of like create a moment in which the conversation can shift. And I always say, we are not a demonstration, but we are sort of trying to keep the conversation moving, and by keep the conversation moving and changing, maybe some kind of movement might start. And I always say, like I said before, the audience is not stupid. Also, the people that participate in questioning are not stupid, because this guy in the red shirt showed up and he told me the first day after I questioned him, he said, like, he's a sociologist, and he said, your questions are wrong. You ask the wrong questions, my dear. You have to learn to ask better questions, otherwise you don't get the right answers. And I'm always like that. I say, if you know how to ask a better question, be my guest, be here tomorrow and help me asking questions. And he did very interestingly. He came for 4 days, wrote me a big report on the right answers. But I think I didn't convey to him that it's actually engaging in this conversation and engaging in it against all odds, or even against the fact that every answer you heard doesn't make any new light, but it's about listening to the complexity of understandings of where we are at this moment in time and how we can move this forward. I think this is sort of in generally very much part of my work, trying to sort of like create performative actions in which we can sort of like start questioning the place where we are, and actually sort of like learn how to act as somebody in your own environment, or as somebody that's be able to act up. I think I'll just show you this one because time is moving quickly. This one took place in Moscow as part of an exhibition was called Impossible Communities, and together with Marcel van der Meijs and Ilya Budraysky, we actually, for the duration of the exhibition, in the preparation of the exhibition, we thought that we would actually try to show in the city all the communities that are under pressure, and the debate of some of the communities that could not be voiced in the city. And we try to do that in actually the way a lot of my work works by creating some kind of hit and run tactics, but also using hidden narratives, common narratives, and sometimes humor in it. And basically we choose 4 communities that could not be represented in public space at that moment in time, and we talk just before the protests that happened in Moscow. And we portray them, this is a shot from the museum later, we portray them in public space. And what was quite interesting is that the museum said at that moment in time, they said like, we are very happy with the idea to do this, but we basically, as soon as you go into the public space with these ideas, you're on your own. We cannot support you from there. You can have your budget as an artist, but you cannot basically use us as means whenever it comes. Because basically what we did, we created, sort of, we used this popular thing of living sculptures, and we created 4 living statues of suppressed communities in public space in front of the ministries that were addressing them. And they were very fun. In front of the Minister of Education, we had a teacher eating Marx, Das Kapital, in favor for some of the books that were supposed to be taught now, because at that moment there was a big discussion on the reforms, education reforms going on. And it was very simple. We had one van with props and one van with statues. And the props popped up, we put a platform, we put the actor, and as long as the actor could stand 40 minutes to an hour, it would be there, and then we move it out. So they were like a hit and run to start a discussion. In front of the Ministry of Defense, we put a soldier discussing on soldiers' poverty. And in front of the Ministry of Work, we put a pregnant woman carrying stones. And as you know, some of them are very remnants of some classical socialist sculptures, basically addressing that. Now again, like I said, most of these things are quick and humorous, but they sometimes start big discussions, but because people recognize them very rapidly, and like this woman said, immediately know that this was about the struggle that was going on about the cutting of pregnancy leave to 3 days for women, and she said, where can I sign up? The petition, and the one on the right to protest in front of the Ministry of Police, just very quickly. I think this idea of showing and telling and trying to sort of start a debate through actually both talking about things but also creating performative actions is quite common, but also sometimes to use, for instance, the situation of an institution or the invitation of an institution to work on the public arena. And I'm not going to talk about this because I cannot talk about this because of time. So I'm talking about you. This was a project I did in Bordeaux, I very briefly said, where I was invited by Evento that just passed by to participate, to be one of the artists to make a large sculpture for the Evento, which is a 2-yearly event. And there was a big discussion going on in Bordeaux at that time around the Evento. Apparently a lot by associations, because they were very much cut down by the government for their assistance, for rights, for community participation, stuff like that. And everybody was wondering why it would be 2 million spent on arts, which is a question I think quite often comes. Why 2 million is spent on arts, and why not give it to associations? And in that sense, basically what I did is that I basically took the money and went in the area where I was asked to work, which I went door to door to speak to most of the associations who were there, and it turned out that in Saint-Michel, which is a quartier of 19,000 inhabitants, 19,000, there were 100 registered associations. And they were all sort of like in one way or another not directly speaking to each other. Some were even next door. For instance, the Association for the Immigrant Rights and the Anti-Discrimination Association were almost 2 doors away. They never spoke to each other, they even didn't work, but they were all fighting vertically to power to get their money. So I basically collected all of the associations, and I think over 60 joined in the project, and I very basically said, here is the money. Here is the money of my part of the project. Evento takes 10 days. You have 10 days to create a collective event. You can decide how to use the money, where to spend it on. and the only rule there is that you have to do it with 2 or 3 together, and that you have to find a way to divide the money. Now that took a year of negotiation to divide the money and to create something that everybody could do, because one of these things, if you work on the conditions with communities, this idea of solidarity is something very complex to deal with, and within my work I think solidarity is something that is also very important. And we have a lot of activities. We had 10 days, 24-hour running event. We had to close 4 hours in the night. We were 20 hours open, and we had like over 300 events organized by different associations in collaborations that divided the money. And we had 3 big debates which were very important. One debate was called Participate or Die, on discussing like, okay, how do we participate, and how do we relate to the powers to be? How can we create a different horizontality? The other one was called Religiosité et le terrain urbain, religion and the urban territory. Also this way about how to deal with the inclusions of differences, but also through religious differences, for instance. And the other one was, and what has art all to do with it? And more strongly it took place in this amazing hall de Douve, but I think that house, that hall de Douve, was supposed to become a sort of like a collective building for different associations, but more like an office building. And the question was there, can a space like that hold also a community in a different way? So rushing through that, but to give an idea about the diversity, because a project like Bordeaux takes a year, I take you to Liverpool, where I'm currently working in the 5th year, in a project that is slowly getting independent. It's not longer needing me. Basically, they're sending me home. And it's about how to take matters into your own hands. How to not only engage into a conversation, but how to then act upon it. And if you act upon it, not only through performative acting, but how can we then sustain these actions, or also these relationships we created, or these temporary forms of solidarity, or these temporary forms of alliance that are created in an event or in public space. Because through an event like Evento, it's okay to knit 60 associations in some form of collective performing of their skills, to demonstrate some of their capacities, but how to sustain a thing like that over periods of time? How not make it something that then disappears? So I take you to Anfield in Liverpool. Anfield in Liverpool, for those who like football, it's where the Anfield Football Club is. There you are. It has been undergoing an immense scheme which is called housing market renewal, and the idea was housing market renewal is to demolish the whole area, tabula rasa. These are like Victorian houses, 2 up, 2 downs, in order to build new houses. And the idea was to do that people that lived there, the 2 up, 2 downs are social housing, people were offered £60,000 to leave their house, and in order to buy a new house you had to pay £90,000 to buy a new house. So the idea of housing market renewal was actually mortgage renewal. That was basically the idea. It's something that probably sounds familiar here in Spain. So it had nothing to do with housing renewal, but it had housing market renewal. It's in the name. It says market renewal, not community renewal. And I think that's something very important. When I came there, there was like 10 years of waiting for something to happen in the area. More strongly, the whole housing market renewal in 2008 came to a stop halt. There was not enough money to deliver the new things. So what they did is they demolished already 1,500 houses, leaving empty plots. They built 78 new houses. Super. But they left streets and streets and streets of still boarded up houses. In which still people were partly living in, other people were displaced, and it was sort of like a massive situation. When I came there, basically talking to people, most people said to me like, you know what the problem is? We are sick of the waiting for something to come, sick of the waiting for promises to be delivered. We participated in actually the scheme because I thought it would bring us new houses, thought it would bring us off-site parking, small gardens, new kitchen appliances, but it didn't bring us anything. And this sickness they described as a condition. And I think I give you Jeanne. I have to go to this video very quickly because she explains it to you what a scheme like that, a government scheme, does to somebody. And she speaks Liverpudlian, so please, the accent is tough, but I cannot change that.
So what ended up happening is we all know that it was a controlled decline, and that was the sad point because my mum and dad had worked hard all alive, you know what I mean? They were paying the mortgage and they were 5 years from finishing it. And they were basically put in a situation where nobody, who was going to buy it? So they were forced into selling, and the money that they got for it was so small, they were then forced to take out another mortgage. And the best bit is the council gave them a loan of £30,000, which the best part is that they have to pay back after the debt, which in effect means me and my two brothers will pay it back. And to me, that is the absolute killer. It should have been £30,000 compensation for being subjected to this, do you know what I mean? Because they had no choice. Because who was going to buy it apart from the council? No one's going to buy it. So they took 10 years to basically bring the street to its knees, and there was nothing wrong with it. There wasn't a single empty. We all played out. As far as I'm concerned, there was no trouble. There was no bother. So we just watched it, and from what I understand and how I figure it, it's just a very simple thing that it's about money, and there was a big pot of gold to the European Union, and in order to access that pot, the area had to tick so many boxes in the magical world of deprivation. So suddenly we were being told all the time that we were from this deprived area, and we were like, I'm not deprived, I don't feel deprived, but we've all got food, we've all got clothes, both parents work, how am I deprived? But the more you feed that in, you pour, you dish that and the other, it's almost like you just watch the standards drop, and everything seemed to drop. And it took about 10 years, but they finally obviously ticked that last box.
So 10 years of being sick, getting sick of waiting, seeing an area going into decline more and more and more, and not even knowing how to deal with it. So when I started working there, I very simply thought, talking to people, listening to people, hearing actually the same thing again and again. This sentence, like, I'm sick of the waiting, very much struck to me as in thinking like maybe we have to stop waiting and start making it again something, and that's maybe the most simple thing we can propose here. And that's basically what we did. We basically started to take matters into our own hands, started to take some of the empty buildings back, and started to basically take over an empty old bakery that closed down after 60 years, the last remaining place where they sold healthy food, because what's left there now is one drugstore and one off-liquor store in the area. And we started to think about, okay, how can we not think about this big master plan, but about the neighborhood as a site of a small-scale alternative? How can we build that? And basically, like in all the projects I showed you before, what is important in one way or another is to set up camp, to start working from somewhere, if it's an empty platform or it's a bench, and to start entering into this discussion, start sharing expertise on what it takes to basically take matters into own hand, what you need for that, what we as a community would need for that, and how you could move on. And we basically asked the Mitchell's family if we could use the empty bakery as a sort of workspace and as a base camp to start working. And we started to talk with young people in the area about how can we redesign the bakery, but also the adjacent houses which are partly boarded up. How can we create housing that is a housing renewal that is for the people, through the people, with the people? What does that need? How would how would cross-generational housing look like? We work with young people and different clients to look into detailed planning of the site. But we also organize meetings about discussing organizational form. What do we need in basically for ourselves to organize ourselves to create this small-scale alternative? And through this kind of meetings and working together on this thing, there's some form of community building, because this community was sort of like thrown apart and scattered around. So to ask people to come back, because a big trust issue, you talked about community, but community is not necessarily just a fixed group, but it's about a group of people that trust in each other to basically make a certain place work. And that trust, quite often by the powers that be, is quite effectively disturbed. We set up a community land trust and a bakery co-op. We became part of the community land trust and the cooperative network. A community land trust is a way to collectively own and manage land, and a cooperative bakery is a combination between a consumer co-op and a workers co-op to create work in the neighborhood, but to also bring fresh food in the neighborhood, to which every buyer is a member, is contributing to the co-op. And the houses and the bakery is owned by the community in order to prevent the place from speculation in the future. But it's also about creating again trust, about asking people again to become active citizens, to become political again. Especially if people are sick of the waiting. It's very hard to basically come together again and to say, okay, let's pick up the fight after 10 years of waiting. Let's do that again. How do you do that? And we did that through using art and theater, while doing very hard exercises in how you legally create one of the first urban land trusts in England. But we also took people on a ride from the city centre in a bus, in a scripted mini bus tour, which basically told the story of the city's failed politics, but also brought you to somebody like Sue's house, one of the members of our land trust, who told about what these kind of programs have for an effect on her daily life. And in 45 minutes you would learn about the project, and you would end up in the bakery where everybody would sort of like collide, because you would meet Jeanne on the street and she would tell you that story on the street. And then you would end up in the bakery, and not as a pop-up bakery as part of an art space or a temporary cafe or a hip thing, but to see that this is a place that might provide livelihood or a different understanding of what this community might need for the future. And through these tours, which were also a way for people to sort of find their own voice, started to shape the narrative that was going on about their community. And we invented super nice slogans. We had slogans like brick by brick, loaf by loaf, we build ourselves. Housing is the battlefield of our time. The house is its monument. I mean, we were very good at becoming big advocates, and that was sort of picked up by a lot of things, by press, by media. Even the New York Times wrote an article about this community fighting the demolition and also fighting the HMR master plan. But while we were doing that, while we were trying to tell the story, while we were trying to inhabit our own narrative about the space, we were at the same time working on how do we manage and own the land, but also how can we start that bakery again. So we were testing and tasting on site. We were opening a training kitchen. We were training local people again to the trade of becoming a baker and also shopkeeping. And since 2 months we are fully up and running open for business. As you can see, Monday to Friday from 10 to 5, 10 to 4:30. We're providing healthy food for the community at the moment, while trying to make money to also develop the rest of the scheme. Now I end with that, and then I'm 5 minutes over time. Yeah. I think these projects, I took you in dazzling speed, even for me it feels like dazzling speed, but through some ways of working, like from trying to have conversations, to try to listen again and again about what might be the problem, what might also be the definition of a possible, or a route towards a possible solution, or at least a possible way in which we collectively could sort of like start engaging and taking responsibility and basically move things on into maybe a future in which we have a more say in the way it's shaped or formed. Now, when you do a temporary event, 4 days, you can make a poster or a radio interview and it's over. If you work with a community on solidarity and then you have a 10 days event, does something last? I mean, they're still working in groups together, but in this case, it's also how do you now, in this case, manage to actually complete this small one-block scheme with the group, as it is a continuous battle for the right to live and work well. Because, and that's always what I say, this is the sad part of every story, is that there is no right solution for any of these answers or any of these negotiations. Because when we started to do this project, when housing market renewal was initially created, they zoned the whole area for demolition. And in order to do that, that was the way they could eminent domain or force people to sell their house. So there was a law made to redline the whole area. Now that law was made 10 years ago. That law is basically still in effect. So although we are open, although we are selling bread, we're still under the risk of demolishing. And 2 days before we opened 2 months ago, we received a letter that the council is considering to demolish the building. And the council basically says, like, listen, if we let you stay, we have so many lawsuits of all the people we evicted before, so we cannot. Despite that you are a place that creates good food, that is very carried by the community, despite we own the land, we still might lose the building. So now this is also the condition that was very sad, because that is a moment through which then with the community that we slowly start to become, how can we look each other in the eyes and say, can we continue this battle? Can we continue this forward? And how will this battle look? Will we barricade the door with sour bread? Or are we going to negotiate with the council? Are we going to move location? What is basically the essence of what we build? Is that the community? Is that the space? Is that the bakery? And how can we hold that truth? And I think that's sort of to loop it back, and I give you for 2 minutes a video 2 girls in the area made, which I think tells a lot about engagement, public space, and how you can create a movement. And I give you Grace Petrie, and then I leave you. Can it be a bit louder? It's music.
We meet your blood with kindness, can we meet your hate with love? Can we keep our years of silence as you crush us from above? As the judgment day draws closer, as the reckoning draws near, there's plenty more of us than you here. And mark my words, we will rise. Mark my words, we will rise. Spread our wings like birds and rain down from the skies. Mark my words, we will rise. As you crush us from above, there's plenty more of us than you here. And mark my words, we will rise. Mark my words, we will rise. Spread our wings like birds and rain down from the skies. Mark my words, we will rise. my words.